high desert and the great American Southwest. I bid you all good evening, good morning, in the darkness of a Halloween night. Thank you for being here, everybody. This is the 2003 annual edition of Ghost to Ghost AM. Always on Halloween night. I want to thank George and Premier, of course, for the opportunity to host the annual Ghost to Ghost program. And I want to remind the rest of the audience that I'm also here on Saturday and Sunday nights now. I don't know if you knew that or not, but I am here on Saturday and Sunday nights. As a matter of fact, tomorrow night is going to be Whitley Strieber, and then Sunday night is going to be John Lear. John Lear has not done a radio interview in many years. John Lear is the son of Bill Lear, who invented actually the Lear jet. And of course, John has many hours in commercial jet aircraft, and boy, does he have a lot to say. So that's going to occur Saturday, Whitley, and he's going to be talking about the sun and an awful lot of things that happened to him early in his life that he's just discovered. Very, very interesting stuff. And then Sunday, John Lear. So if your radio station doesn't get the Saturday, Sunday version of Coast, call them up and say, hey, what's up? You know, get us Saturday and Sunday. Now, Ghost to Ghost. There will be no guest tonight. This program is entirely caller-driven. Either I will call you because you have sent me a ghost story and your phone number, or you will call me. Either way, the subject is only one, and that's ghosts. Are they an important subject? Yes. Not just tonight, but 365 days a year, because, you know, it may answer the question, the biggest question really in our life, and that is, do we have eternal souls which survive our physical death, inevitable and crawling up minute by minute for all of us? Is there something that comes after this? It's the biggest question in the world. So is it an important subject? Yes. And those stories that I want from you are the very best, nothing but the best, the scariest, the most frightening of all the stories that might be told, because I know they've well, how do I know so many have happened? Because I have received thousands of emails and ghost stories. I've selected a few, and we will take, of course, from the phone some number tonight. But is it an important question? Is there any more important question in this life than whether that's it? Whether it's the worms in and out, or whether there's actually something that comes after this? Well, the stories are going to roll tonight. In a moment, we begin Ghost to Ghost. If you have big orange Halloween cojones, you might want to turn the lights off and sort of provide a setting for what's to come, because that's part of it. And people do enjoy being scared. I enjoy being scared, and so I turn out the lights, and this program generally scares the hell out of me. Shall we begin? First-time caller line, you're on the air. Hi there.
Hi.
What is your name?
My name's Virginia.
Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Virginia, good morning to you. Where are you?
I'm in Arkansas.
In Arkansas.
Uh-huh.
And well, fire away.
Okay. This happened 2 years ago. It was the end of summer, and I had taken my 9-year-old son down to Galveston. The idea was to, lay in the sun and relax.
Sure.
We'd been there a couple of days. We were staying in a beach house, and I decided to take him down to the shoreline to look for shells and things.
I always did that.
Uh-huh. And the low tide was at midnight. So we walked down to the shore, and we just had one little regular flashlight. And the moon was about a quarter moon coming up in the east, and it was really sort of surreal, even at the beginning. We had walked east for a long ways, and weren't really finding anything, and you know how kids are. He was real jumpy and, you know, thought the crabs were going to bite his toes off or something.
You know what I think, Virginia? I think when something is about to happen, you said it was surreal. It felt surreal.
It was.
There's a kind of a prequel, you know, a sort of a something hanging in the air before something happens.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I kept looking for something, you know, and he wanted to go back after about the first 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
After we'd been down there about an hour with me saying, no, let's just walk a little bit more, I had heard him say the words, Mom, what's that? About 1,000,000 times already. But he said it again, and it sounded different. You know, his voice changed. And I stood up and, you know, straightened up and shined the light down the beach. We were headed back west at this time. And I saw feet, you know, and as I took a few more steps, you know, there was, you know, the rest of this man laying right where the water meets the sand.
Laying?
Mm-hmm. Laying on his back, his feet towards us, laying right where the water meets the sand.
Uh-huh.
And so I told,
apparently alive or dead?
Well, it was hard to tell at this point.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so to answer my son's question, I said, well, you know, it's a man laying in the surf. Well, you know how when you shine your light on somebody, you instinctively, you just kind of have this oops reaction, and you shine the light right back off.
Right.
You know, you're sort of embarrassed that you shined it right in their face.
Sure.
Well, we walked, you know, a few more steps, and I would kind of, you know, do the light back over that way, and was trying to kind of keep my son behind me. You know, I call it being in mommy mode.
Yep.
But we got, you know, a few more feet closer and then a few more feet closer, and I was gradually, you know, looking back over there to see if he had moved or anything, and he hadn't. And, you know, I was beginning to know that it wasn't a man just laying in the surf. I couldn't be that lucky. And the last time I shined the flashlight over there, I saw a wave come over his head, and he made no response, and his arms kind of floated funny, and I knew that he was dead. Uh-huh. Well, I told my son that we needed to go, and I had been, you know, plodding along so slow, you know, that it scared him, you know, that, you know how
about we need to go call 911?
Well, I didn't say that, and I just said, we got to go.
Right.
And I, you know, grabbed all my stuff and, you know, hopped. There was a long lot of seaweed that year, you know, and you kind of have to jump over that.
Yeah.
And he said, well, why? And I said, well, we need to get back to the house. And right when I said we have to go, I heard this man's voice clearly. I mean, just like I can hear you now.
Yes.
I heard him say, no, not yet.
No, not yet.
No, not yet. And I thought, what? You know, I was like between him and my son, and like I said, I call it being in mommy mode, and I went anyway, you know, and I kept thinking, you know, I should run right up there and check this guy, you know, try to help him, but I don't know how to explain the feeling that you have as a mother. I did not want my son
involved in anything.
No.
Of course not. And so then what did you do?
Well, without breaking into a dead run, we went back to the beach house. I called 911,
right.
Put my son on the couch. The fire trucks went roaring by. I will say they have great response time. Mm-hmm. Beach patrol, city, county, everybody was there. And so I got my son situated, and I went back down there. Beach patrol told me that they hadn't even attempted CPR and that I shouldn't feel bad about that at all, that I hadn't, you know, because they didn't try. He had been in the water too long, and, yes, he was definitely dead. And they, you know, of course, took my entire life history, And we stood there and talked for a while, and the search and rescue guy and one of the other cops pulled the guy up out of the water, and, and laid him on the beach, and I went home. Well, nothing like this has ever happened to me. And, there I was alone, and when I got back to the beach house, my son was sound asleep, and I made a couple of phone calls. I'm sure I sounded hysterical to these people.
Sure.
And I sat on the porch, and that down on the coast, the wind is always blowing. And I sat there, and I was just crying and crying, and I was, like talking aloud and just really just focused on, mentally and aloud, who were you and what happened?
Yes.
Because down on the beach, they had sort of one of the cops had said, well, what way is the current going? And one of the men had said, well, he was probably from the state park, and I immediately knew that wasn't right for some reason. I just knew that wasn't right.
Any more contact with this man or what's left of him?
Yes. While I was sitting on the porch, saying, who are you? I just had to know who he was.
Right.
This figure sort of materialized at the top of the steps. It wasn't like his feet were not on the porch. I don't know how to explain it.
Floating?
It's sort of, it's kind of hard to explain.
When you say materialized, fully materialized as in a solid human being or sort of?
No.
Okay.
No.
I've got it.
But very clear, though.
Yes.
And he told me that his name was Michael.
Oh.
And I said, well, what happened? And, who were you with?
Yeah.
Where were you? Because I don't think the state park's right. And he gave me 2 other names. And the next day, he didn't leave. The next day, he was back and told me to look on a map and showed me the next sort of subdivision down west on the beach.
Well, what had happened to Michael?
He had been down on the beach with 2 friends. They had been partying some. He didn't go into a lot of detail. I felt like it was a very suspicious thing.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, here you are talking to a dead person, not fully materialized in front
of you.
I mean, weren't you totally freaked?
Yes, I was. And I was for a long time afterwards.
How long did he remain with you in totality?
Until I left.
Which was?
He died on a Wednesday night.
Yes.
At midnight. I found him actually at 1 a.m. on a Thursday. He had been in the water for a couple hours. I left that Friday, and he was not identified until that Friday when the local paper had a huge article on the front page with his physical description and all that kind of,
and
clothing.
His name was indeed Michael.
His name was indeed Michael.
And why did Michael wish to speak to you? Just to get it right? Was that the idea, the impression you had?
Actually, the impression that I had was, this sounds a little crass, but he was really ticked off that he woke up dead.
Yeah.
He was not happy.
I can imagine.
I know.
Yes, indeed.
It sounds kind of bad to say that.
But he was aware he was dead.
I don't think he was at first. I think that's
really
what the no, not yet was about.
Gotcha.
I think when he said that was the minute he realized that he was dead. He was also, I think, trying to communicate with people that he knew. He had lived down there for half of his life.
Did he essentially say goodbye to you? Did was he aware of when you left? Were you aware of? Yes?
Yes.
And what did he say at the end?
I went and I stood at the top of the boardwalk that goes down to the beach.
Yes.
And I could feel his arms around my shoulders like he was giving me a hug. And he actually apologized for having put me through all that. But I think, really, I was the only person that could hear him, and that's why he kept coming back to me.
Of course. So many questions. I mean, if you get to talk to somebody who's dead, did you ask any of the questions a person might ask, like, now...
They don't answer everything. You know, he never told me his last name.
Yeah. Well, you had a full-fledged discussion with a ghost.
Yes.
That's one hell of a story, Virginia.
Yes, it is.
All right, my dear. Thank you.
Thank you,
and good night. So, I've heard this many times, that when we die, we don't necessarily understand right away that we're dead, and somehow we manage to reach out and interface with whoever's there, maybe whoever finds our body, like that case, to find a body just sitting there, sort of swirling around in the near the sand and the surf. Wildcard line, good evening or morning or whatever, you're on the air.
Hi, Art, is this me?
It is indeed you. What is your first name?
My first name is Eric.
Okay, Eric, what's up?
Well, I guess this story begins back in the early 1990s when I purchased a fairly old house in downtown Atlanta, about 60 years old or so. And it was really odd because I noticed soon after we moved in that my dog, a Jack Russell Terrier, would refuse to sleep in the bedroom. And this was very uncharacteristic. She was one of those dogs that likes to hog the bed and, you know, it's just always in there.
Yes, like the cats I have, yeah.
And she just hated to go in there. She would go in for about a second and just head right back out again. And the one exception to that is every now and then, over the years, she would catch a mouse. And she would take it into the bedroom, and she would kill it there, and she would shake it so vigorously that blood, it's kind of gross, but it would splatter against this one particular wall. It was always in the same place.
Oh, great.
So I'd come
mouse
home.
Blood.
Yeah, and I'd come home, and of course I wouldn't be too happy about that.
No.
But anyways, after I'd been in that house for a few years, I started experimenting with OBEs. I've been listening to your show by then for a while. And
out-of-body experiences, yes.
Yes, Albert Taylor.
Yes. Yes, he laid out the groundwork for how to do an OBE.
Yes. And actually I got his books and a few others. I think Bill Buellman's books.
Yes.
And I really applied myself for a few months, and I actually did have my first OBE. It took about 3 or 4 months to do, but I was determined I wanted to see what it was like.
It's quite shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, it was really amazing. It was it was a state of awareness that I'd never been in before. It definitely was not a dream.
Did you meet something or somebody?
Well, at first I was just kind of floating above my body, and it was really weird because I could see in like every direction at once. I don't really know how to explain that. But soon right after that, I saw some kind of shape against the wall where the mouse blood got splattered every now and then.
Oh.
And I saw it was a small dog, probably like a black poodle. It was about the closest I could make out what it was.
Yes.
And it was like lapping at the ground like there was a pool of liquid there or something like that. It was just kind of licking.
Yeah.
And I was jarred by this because I thought, there's some weird black dog in my room, and, I got in the house somehow. So immediately I shot back up into my body, and I turned on the light, and there was no dog there, and there was no liquid on the ground either.
Uh-huh.
So, I didn't really know what to make of that. But when I sold that house a few years later, my neighbor, she was about an 80-year-old woman. She was very nice. She lived there next door to my house for about 50 years.
Yes.
And she said she'd been dying to tell me the history of my house, but she didn't want to tell me when I lived there. She didn't want to scare me.
And the history was?
Well, back in the 1950s or so, a young newlywed couple had purchased my house, and shortly thereafter, the husband was killed in a car accident just a few blocks from the house.
All right, I'll tell you what, that's a good punchline point. Hold it right there, all right?
Okay, sure.
We'll get back to you right after the break. You're listening to the annual Ghost to Ghost program I'm Art Bell from the high desert. It's cold and the winds are blowing out there.
I've had nothing but bad luck since the day I saw the cat at my door. So I came into you, sweet lady, answering your mystical call. Crystal ball on the table, showing the future, the past. Same cat with them evil eyes, and I knew it was a spell she cast.
An old cowpoke went riding out one dark and windy day. Upon a ridge he rested as he went along his way. When all at once a mighty herd of red-eyed cows he saw, a-plowing through the ragged skies and up a cloudy draw. The ghost herd in the sky. Their brands were still on fire and their hooves were made of steel. Their horns were black and shiny and their hot breath he could feel. A bolt of fear went through him as they thundered through the sky, for he saw the riders coming hard, and he heard their mournful cry. Ghost riders in the sky.
Want to take a ride? Call Art Bell from west of the Rockies at 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies at 1-800-825-5033. First-time callers may reach Art at area code 775-727-1222. Or call the wild card line at 775-727-1295. To talk with Art on the toll-free international line, call your AT&T operator and have them dial 800-893-0903. This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell.
By the way, this is the original, the very original of this. Welcome to the Halloween 2003 Ghost to Ghost program. In a moment, we continue. Incidentally, you might want to check out the webcam photograph this evening. It's pretty neat. There's no way my wife, Ramona, though, can look devilish. She's just beautiful. Even when she actually sits there and puts on a face and tries to look devilish. She's actually, she's just beautiful no matter what. So you might take a look, though. And now back to our friend with his dog. Yes, sir. Continue,
Yes.
please. Yes.
So let's see. I think I was just saying that my next-door neighbor, the old lady, had been telling me that a newlywed couple back in the 1950s, they purchased my house, and shortly after that, the husband was killed in a car accident just a couple blocks from the home.
Mm.
And a neighbor apparently found out about that right away, and she rushed to get the wife just a few minutes after it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And she arrived on the scene, and she found her husband's body. It was decapitated, and
Oh, my.
sure it was a very grisly experience.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and so she was, of course, distraught and hysterical. And she went back to the house and went into the bedroom, and she shot herself in the head with a gun.
God.
And my next-door neighbor said that she heard the shot, and she looked, and she could see through the bedroom window that far wall, she just saw blood splattered on it.
Blood there.
Yeah, and it was the same wall that, my dog enjoyed splattering the mouse blood on, which I thought was something. And, I was curious at that point. I said, did they happen to own any pets? And she said, yeah, they owned a small black dog. And, of course, that kind of sent chills down my spine.
I'm sure that'd be the last time I OB'd.
Yeah, it was a while after that, and I never did in that bedroom again.
I fully understand. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Take care. All right. Well, you see, what is it that animals know that we don't? Obviously something, huh? They have a connection, perhaps, to a bridge world that we can only very occasionally pierce. They see things that, well, we don't. Cats certainly do. Any of you animal owners and lovers out there know exactly what I mean. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Hi.
Hi. How you doing, Art?
I'm fine. What is your first name?
My name is Rob.
Okay, Rob.
Well, my story that I have for you tonight concerns some incidents that occurred to me when I was stationed at the Portsmouth Naval Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And the hospital has an interesting history. It was built in 1830, was the very first naval hospital ever built.
Mm-hmm.
And the building that I was in was the original hospital building. They called it Building 1. And when we first got to the command there, they told us a few stories. And one of them they told us was about a specter that they called the Lady in Red. Excuse me. And this had to be a nurse that was supposedly worked on the surgical unit there during the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And she had apparently hung herself on the 5th floor of the building there, which was the old surgical unit.
Mm-hmm.
How she got the term Lady in Red, we never quite understood. But they told us when we first got there that there were strange things that would happen periodically, not to be alarmed. So,
in other words, they just got used to a presence.
Yes,
Yeah.
more or less.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I had that happened to me, the first unit that I was assigned to, and I did work in the psychiatric unit, which was stationed on the 3rd floor.
Strange enough anyway, yes.
Yes,
I was a medic in the Air Force, thank you.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, then you know a little bit.
A little bit.
About it. So at any rate, this first unit that I was on was an open bay unit. So it just had the rows of beds on each side
Mm-hmm.
of the ward.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have any privacy or anything.
Yeah, straight ward. I understand.
Right. So most of the shifts that I worked there were the graveyard shifts from the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. So I spent a lot of time in there in the middle of the night. And this first incident, we had just a handful of patients on the unit that evening. It was somewhere around late November.
Uh-huh.
And it was rather cold. So we had all the lights out except for a light at the very front desk where I was sitting and just reviewing some charts. There was another corpsman with me, but he was off to the side. We had a little wing that ran adjacent to it, and he was by himself.
Mm-hmm.
So I was out on the unit minding the store, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this young man. He was about 18, 19 years old, and he had gotten up. It was about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And he approached the desk and went past me to the restroom. But he looked a little shaky when he went past me.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came back out, he asked me if I knew who was wandering around in the back of the unit. And I told him that there wasn't anybody back there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he proceeded to tell me that he had seen this woman and that she was dressed in antique clothing and that she appeared to be floating in the back, and she was circling around a pool table that they had in the very back for recreation.
Bearing in mind you're in a psychiatric unit here, right?
Yeah. And so, you're taking a little bit of it with a grain of salt.
Yes.
So, I didn't at first really think anything of it. I thought perhaps he had been dreaming, had just woke up.
And so what happened?
Well, he was very insistent that something very strange was going on. So I got the other corpsman, and together we went back to the back of the unit with a pair of flashlights. And we did have one little dim light that was on outside of the medicine room.
Right.
And we didn't see a thing. But this young man was so insistent that he had seen this woman, described her, the period dress that she wore.
Yes.
And he was so frightened that he refused to go back to his bunk. He insisted on sleeping closer to the desk.
Well, I can't say that I blame him at all, but
No,
why would you give it particular credence since it was a psychiatric ward after all?
This particular ward, it was for what we called adjustment disorders, which was nothing terribly serious. It's just usually young kids that when they got out of boot camp, they get thrown into their first command. And
well, okay, so you never saw this entity yourself.
I never actually saw it, but it was, and the next morning, when we mentioned it in the morning report, the AM crew coming on,
right?
The head nurse, he was a lieutenant commander, had been in the Navy for over 20 years.
Yes.
And he looked at me and he said, "Did you make a note of it?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, that's good." He said, "Because this kind of stuff happens fairly regular." And he said, "Don't be alarmed." And he said it so matter-of-factly, as if to say, "Yeah, we know what this is."
I gotcha. All right. Well, thank you very, very much. Well, on the one hand, you dismiss it because it's a psychiatric patient, but then on the other, there's history. I wonder if the sane at death are as likely to incarnate on the other side in some way, if that really is the other side, as the sane. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Happy Halloween, Art. This is Jerry from Bismarck, North Dakota on KFYR 550 on the AM channel.
That's the way to do it, buddy. All right.
I have a good one for you.
Fire away.
I was attending college and living with friends in a haunted house in Fargo, North Dakota in the early 1970s.
How'd you know it was haunted?
Well, let me go on here and I'll tell you.
All right.
We all experienced the mischievousness of one or more poltergeists residing with us in the house. Every day, without exception, lights would turn on unexpectedly. The entrance door would open and close, although upon checking for visitors, there would be no one there. In our kitchen was a pantry that had a curtain opening the door. Once in a while sitting in the kitchen table, the curtain would fly straight out as if someone or something would be pulling it straight out.
That would do it for me.
One time, the hall curtain burst into flames. Fortunately, someone was there to douse the flames. I had the bedroom in the attic of this old house, and many nights I would hear someone walking up the stairs. When I turned on the light to explore the situation, there would be no one there. During lightning storms, my possessions such as shoes and books would be thrown across the room and sometimes directly at me while I was laying in bed.
You actually saw these things going through the air and coming directly at you?
I did. I felt them.
Yeah.
My dog, a golden lab, was always growling or whining at something in my bedroom. I saved the best for last. One night, we all retired to our respective bedrooms for a good night's sleep. I must have been unusually tired because I fell asleep immediately and don't recall waking up all night. In the morning, I woke up fairly refreshed and felt something cold beside me in my bed. I reached for it and found a butcher knife laying beside me in my bed. I wondered how in the hell a butcher knife ended up in bed with me. I first thought it was a prank by one of my other roommates, but I realized that couldn't possibly be because I always lock my bedroom door when I retire at night. I proceeded to get dressed for the day and grab my butcher knife to return it to the kitchen drawer where it belongs. As I was passing one of my roommate's bedrooms, he and his girlfriend were just exiting the bedroom, and he turned white as a sheet when he saw me with the butcher knife in my hand. I asked him what was wrong, and he began to tell me about the harrowing experience earlier that night. He said he was awakened by a person he said looked like me, standing over his bed with a butcher knife in both hands above my head, about to stab him.
My God.
He said he could not yell out and was able to move his hands back and forth, and the person dissipated into the thin air. His girlfriend had slept through the whole ordeal. One other thing, because his girlfriend was spending the night, he said the bedroom door was locked to protect their intimacy.
Have you ever had thoughts of murder?
No, I haven't. He still is a good friend of mine, and I never had any negative thoughts about him at all throughout my whole life.
But he saw you with that butcher knife in both hands, and you found the butcher knife in your bed.
And the butcher knife ended up in my bed.
All right, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Art.
And good night. Well, you know, that sounds like something you'd tell a defense attorney, right? He dreamed it. And I was I standing about, no, with a butcher knife? No. How did it get in my bed? Well, I don't know. I don't know how it got there. Only in those cases, there's usually a bloody mess in the other room. Not the person just waking up telling you about a dream. On our international line, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi, Art.
Well, hi there. What's your first name?
My name's Robert. I'm in Albany, New York, listening on News Talk Radio 810 WGY.
Welcome to the program.
I don't know why I'm on the international line, other than the fact that I'm 5 miles from Albany International Airport.
Well, that's because I called you, and I got to choose the line. So what's up?
Well, I had emailed you the story, and that's why you called me. And
that's right.
And if there's time, I'd like to give a little history leading up to the story, which increases the impact of it.
We'll do the best we can.
Okay. In 1974, I began having premonitions of my father's impending death. I did not believe in psychic phenomena at the time, and my father, so far as I could tell, seemed to be in perfect health. And I kept dismissing these things as some sort of odd psychological thing that would just pass. And one night I was asleep, and I suddenly woke in a cold sweat. The family cat, which had still lived in our family home in upstate New York, I was living in Manhattan at the time, I heard that family cat scream, and an image came into my mind of the cat being run over. I took that to be a very odd dream.
Sure.
Went back to sleep. And about a week and a half later, I'm visiting my parents at the home in upstate New York. And it turns out the cat hadn't been seen since that very night. And at that point, the reality of that experience hit me. And I began to wonder if these premonitions I was having about my father were true.
And those were?
Those were that my father was going to die, despite the fact that he seemed to be in perfect health.
Yeah.
Now, I'd always had a phobia about learning to drive, and one of the reasons I was living in Manhattan rather than commuting was that I'd never learned to drive. The reason I never learned to drive is any time I sat in the front seat of a car, I kept getting this visual in my head of going through the windshield. Even when I would go to a store or be window shopping, I wouldn't get too close to the plate glass.
Right.
Because I would have this visual in my head of going through the glass.
You apparently were learning to trust your intuition.
As a result of the experience with the cat, I was beginning to wonder, and I figured better safe than sorry.
Right.
So I began to take driver's lessons. My hand-eye coordination was never the best, so it took several months before I finally passed the test. I bought a new car, got rid of my apartment in the city, moved back to the family home so that I would be there. My mother was disabled. The house was in the middle of nowhere. There was no way to get there except by car. And if anything was going to happen to my father, it would fall upon me to take care of my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm there 1 week, 2 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. My father seems to be in perfect health, and I'm beginning to think I've made a first-class fool of myself.
Gotcha.
And I'm beginning to look in the New York Times, trying to find another apartment in the city, and move back and figure out how I'm going to get rid of my car. Well, one night I was working in New York City at the time. I would drive 35 miles to the bus stop, take the bus in. I would work, and that night I had a date with my girlfriend, who later became my wife, and she did something she never did before, and our relationship was 4 years duration at that point. She stood me up, and I'm waiting in the lobby of her apartment house, very swanky apartment house, and I'm waiting 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Finally, it gets to the point where if I don't leave, I'm going to be stranded because I've got to catch the last bus.
Uh-huh.
So I catch the last bus, I drive home, I get home very late. I go into my room. I can't sleep. Suddenly there's a knock at the door. And it's my mother saying, your father's breathing funny. So I go and I rush in, and there's my father, eyes wide open, not breathing at all. And I try to do CPR. Nothing's happening. And my father died in my arms. I was 23 years old at the time, and you can imagine how traumatic that was.
I can, yes.
But had I not had this warning and not made these preparations, it would have been a far greater disaster. Now, let's flash forward 2 years. It's 1977. At that time, I had come up in the world in terms of my career. I was running the night shift of a major ed typography studio in New York City. This is back before the days of the Macintosh and desktop publishing revolution, when it actually took skill to produce typography.
Okay, we got about a minute or so.
Okay, I'll rush through the rest of this then. I'm driving on Upper Manhattan, going downtown early on a Saturday morning. I'd worked about a 16-hour shift.
Right.
I glanced in, I had a Pinto. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and there I see my father.
Your father?
Who had died 2 years before, with a look of urgency on his face, leaning forward with his hands on the back of my bucket seat. Suddenly there's a bang. The car careens out of control, and just like you see in the movies, time seems to slow down as the car flies. Now, if any of you know Manhattan, down the center island at 74th Street, there's this big concrete pillar like they have in Paris where they post community notices.
I know the ones.
Okay, my car smashed into that pillar. Front of the car was smashed in. Passenger side was bent at a 45-degree angle.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know at the time Pintos were supposed to explode in flame when hit from the rear.
That's right.
Which it didn't. At the point of impact, my bucket seat flew back, and I was lying down. When the dust settled and I managed to extricate myself from what was left in my car, I saw the damage. I walked around and assessed the damage. The clip on the back of the bucket seat had broken, so I was lying down. The car was totaled, so I opened the glove box to take out the various documents in there.
Just about out of time, yes.
Well, a dollar bill that my father had given me when he was alive for luck to keep in the glove box was gone.
Take care, my friend, and thank you. And have a good life. From the high desert, this is Ghost to Ghost AM.
East of the Rockies, 1-800-825-5033. First-time callers may reach Art at 1-775-727-1222 or use the wildcard line at 1-775-727-1295. To reach Art on the toll-free international line, call your AT&T operator and have them dial 800-893-0903. This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell on the Premier Radio Network.
Actually, this is Ghost to Ghost AM. Your calls only all night long. In a moment, we'll get right back to it. This is Halloween. Go ahead. Turn the lights down and let's go. On my guest line, you're on the air. Ghost to Ghost AM. Hi. Hello there.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
What is your first name?
Cindy.
Cindy.
And I live in Dallas, Texas.
Dallas.
Listening on Cliff.
Okay.
Well, I had emailed my story into you, and it's not that it's so scary, but I think it's a message from beyond, definitely.
That'll do.
Okay. Well, about 12 years ago, my father passed away unexpectedly. He had a heart attack, and so he wasn't able to say goodbye to my sister and myself. Mm-hmm. But what was interesting is that for 35 years he had worked for Oscar Mayer Company. And most of us know that that's the manufacturing plant where they make the different lunch meats, hot dogs, etc.
I think hot dogs when you say hot.
Exactly,
Yeah.
hot dogs. So when we were little children in the 60s, my dad would always bring home, and anyone who grew up in the Midwest would probably remember this, these little red weenie whistles.
Oh, of course.
Are you familiar with those?
Yes, of course. I remember
And they had the
them.
little holes, and you would blow, and you played a little musical song.
Right.
And on, like, hot dog packages, they have the little weenie mobile on, if you ever looked at the front of Oscar Mayer hot dog package. Well, anyway, so that was our family's joke growing up as kids. We always had these red weenie whistles in the 60s and 70s all over the house, and we'd play the little song, and that was just our little family thing. So fast forward to when my father passes away. And I called my sister, and I told my sister that my father had died. She lived in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
So she was driving up to Iowa to go to the funeral. And when she got to the funeral, I was already there, and she just kind of looked upset and kind of bewildered. And I talked to her, and I said, well, what's wrong besides we're coming to the funeral? And she said, Cindy, the weirdest thing has happened. She goes, on my way driving from St. Louis to Iowa, as I was driving down the highway, this huge weenie mobile was driving toward me, the promotional car.
Yes.
And she said, if that isn't a message from Dad, I don't know what is, because we didn't get to say goodbye to him. And so I said, well, that is really strange, because most people in their lifetime will never see this car that drives around with a big hot dog on top. And so that kind of tweaked her out, but she felt it was a message. Well, I'm a school teacher. And after the funeral, I came back to Dallas, and my first day back at school, I'm a high school art teacher. One of my students was looking through a big box of old magazines for an idea for an art project.
Mm-hmm.
And this was my first day back from the funeral. Out of the blue, the student says to me, I don't know why, but I just found a picture in an old magazine of a weenie mobile.
I know. That might do it for me.
And he calls me over, and he says, look at this.
Yes.
And it was just an old magazine that, I keep in the classroom, probably from the 70s, 80s kind of thing, that the kids can cut up. And here was that same promotional car that my sister had driven by on the way to the funeral.
That's a little much.
Well, it gets even weirder, because then this student looked at me and he said, I don't know why, but I'm just compelled. I'm going to draw this for my art project. And he goes, his exact words were, I can't even explain to you why I'm going to do this, but I'm going to draw this for you.
Yes.
And it gets weirder. The student's name was Chris, and my father's name was Chris.
Uh-huh.
Now, it gets a little more strange. I'm almost finished.
Okay.
I decide I'm going to show my mother this picture that this kid has drawn of this weenie mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have it in my hands, and I come home, and my mother watched my daughter, who was about 7 at the time. And so my little girl comes running up to me as I have this picture of a weenie mobile in my hand. And she was like, Mommy, look what Grandma found and Grandma gave me today. And I said, what's that? And she opened her hand, and she had the little red weenie whistle in her hand. And in my hand, I'm holding a drawing from a student of this Wienermobile.
Yes.
And so the two of us just kind of looked at each other, and I was like, I don't think a message from beyond can be any louder,
any clearer, yes,
than that.
Well, that's wonderful, and that's right. I think that our loved ones, when they get to the other side, depending on what they're able to do, they get messages back, and that was one of those.
And just a quick and brief note how weird this is. Last night I was watching TV, and I was wondering if maybe my story would get on your show. Last night I was watching television, and there was a little clip for a show coming up, and on this clip it's about the red weenie mobile. And when I saw it last night, I just knew. I said, I'll be on your show tonight telling the story.
And so you have been. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, take care. Well, there you have it. Well, yes, what would be, think about it for a second. Aside from the fact that you would realize you are dead, and that would be some very serious realization, I suppose, for you, what would you first want to do? And the answer is you'd want to get hold of your relatives, or at the very least send them some kind of message. And, of course, that's exactly what that was. Now, a slightly circuitous route, to be sure, but nevertheless, a message. And that's what you may be wanting to do when you get to the other side. You may want to send a message back, and it may not be easy. Manifestation may be very difficult. And the kind of message that this lady got, perhaps that's something you can do. You're on the air, Ghost to Ghost AM, on the first-time caller line. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. What is your first name?
My name's Colleen.
Colleen, what's up?
Well, I live on the eastern shore of Maryland, on Chesapeake Bay.
Okay.
And I'm a director of nursing for an assisted living facility.
Oh, yes.
And where I work is a very old building. It's over 100 years old. We celebrated our 100-year anniversary this past June. And the original structure of the building was a gift from a former governor of Maine to his daughter, who was a young bride at the time. And the home has two large wings on either side of it, and this is where the residents live in this assisted living building. Right after I started working there, the residents, several of them, would come to me and complain of a young boy that kept pestering them, bothering them, telling them to go places they weren't supposed to go, pushing, going in the elevator, and the buttons would go up and down, and he would climb up on top of their dressers and taunt them, and he was just a bothersome
a young boy out of nowhere. I mean, this is a place where older people are. It's assisted living, right? So
right.
There shouldn't be any
at first I thought
children.
it was a family visiting, and this little boy was part of the family.
Oh,
so as I would go up to investigate this little boy who was bugging them so much, I would say, well, please tell me where he is, and I'll go talk to the family and see if they can keep him in better control.
Sure.
Well, they would point, of course, and there was no little boy there, and I'd be like, well, where is he? And they would say, over there, can't you see him? He's in the elevator, or he's on top of my dresser. Please take him away.
And all of these older people would be seeing him, and you wouldn't?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So I started to get the hair rising on the back of my neck, thinking, okay, am I the one, who's seeing weird or feeling weird here? Is it just, is it somebody else? But I would talk to employees who've worked there for over 20 years and say, the weirdest thing happened to me today, and I would tell my story, and they'd be like, so you're going to get to see the little boy too. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, this little boy has been showing himself, at least as long as we've been here and probably longer. And what we think he is, or who we think he is the young son of the bride who the home was given to, because apparently she had several boys, and the youngest one had died at an early age. We don't know what from, but it's a little weird when you're walking down the hall and you see the elevator door pop open and no one's there.
Yeah, well, you see, it does seem as though we tend to stay in the surroundings of the place where we died, so actually that does make sense. Did you ever see this young boy yourself?
I've never seen him, no. I would love to.
You really want to?
Well, yeah, sure I do. And, there's many ghosts there, and there's many stories, and I have a resident who won't even sleep in her bed. She's been there for over 2 years, and she refuses to sleep in the bed because she swears the bed moves when she's in it. And to prove to her, that there was nothing wrong with the bed, I laid down in it, and I was like, okay, well, this is a normal bed. It doesn't move, but, it's the Alzheimer's patients mostly. And I often think, do they have some connection that we don't?
Boy,
they start losing
a really good question. Thank you very, very much. That's a really good question. Do you suppose in life that when we begin losing some of our faculties, as would have been the case in the story she just told and with the people she deals with, that our brain in some way makes up for the loss of those faculties by giving us some additional ability, as in, I see a dead person. Maybe not dead people, but a dead person, one who's been in residence here since he died here. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Ghost to Ghost AM. Hi.
Hi, Art.
How are you?
I'm fine. This is Pat in Houston.
Pat in Houston. Hi, Pat.
Are you having a happy Halloween?
Well,
it's a ghostly Halloween.
That's right. I prefer exactly what we're doing right now, Pat. What's up?
Well, this is a story that happened to me several years ago. We had some very good friends, and our husbands decided to go hunting one weekend. My friends had just been able to buy a brand new house in a very plush, exclusive part of Houston. And it was a very expensive house, and we were very young, and so I wanted to go spend the night and see how her house was.
Sure.
Okay, so it was raining that weekend, like it can rain in Houston in the coastal areas. It just rains and rains, and husbands went on and went hunting, but my friend had told me that I may not want to stay with her that night because weird things had been happening in her house. And I told her, oh, you know, nothing scares me. I was young then, and I welcomed the time to go spend with her and her daughter. So we ate supper, and it got dark, and we went to bed. Well, their house was a long contemporary ranch-style house with one big bedroom on one end and the living room in the middle and the kitchen on the other end with an attached garage. Well, we talked for a while, and then we went to sleep, and I woke up all of a sudden. Both of our daughters were just screaming loudly.
Oh.
They were in a little nursery that was kind of attached on the side of the bedroom we were in.
Yes.
So I jumped up to go see what was wrong with them, but as I was getting out of the bed, I felt a cold feeling just start from one side of me on my right side. And it must have taken maybe 10 seconds to go pass all the way through my body. It was the coldest that I've ever been in my life. It's just really hard to describe.
And you could actually feel it moving across your body.
It was like you were just, I don't know how to even explain it. You were just frozen. You just couldn't do anything except experience that really terrific coldness.
You're doing fine.
Yes. And so it left, and I got up to see what the girls were doing, and they were quiet by then. But as I was checking them, there was a terrible pounding on the living room front door. And so I started to go to the front door, and my friend started just sobbing, just saying, please don't go to the front door. Don't go, don't go. It won't do any good. And I was like, well, I'm going to go see who's at the door. Well, then the pounding kind of moved around to the garage door.
You're like every lady who dies in any horror flick I've ever seen. Yeah, sure, let's go to the basement. Well, let's go open the door.
See who's out there with the butcher knife, right?
That's right. That's right. So you go to the door, huh?
Right. So I headed for the kitchen to go to the garage door because that's where the pounding was. Well, then the pounding stopped there, and I looked over to my right, and there were big patio doors looking out at their big backyard. And there was huge, just pounding, just frantic pounding, like the glass would almost break.
Yeah.
But when I looked, there was nobody there. So by this time, I was really kind of afraid, and my friend was going...
Well, it's about time.
Just come back, don't go. But I did. I called the police. I called 911 and got the police, and it was a very exclusive part of Houston, so they were there as fast as you could put the phone down almost. And I let them in to the house because they wanted to check it out. And my friend was going, oh, please, please, no one is here. Just won't do any good. She was hysterical by then.
Yeah.
So the police checked the doors, and they decided to walk around the perimeter of the house. Well, it had been raining so much. There were no footprints outside at all.
Right.
But they could hear the pounding on the garage door to the kitchen. So they came into the garage, to the kitchen, and tried to open the garage door.
Yes.
They could not even wedge that door open. My friends had not unpacked all their boxes, and the garage was just stuffed to the rafters with packing boxes. And so bad that the police could not even wedge the door open.
Right.
So they said, well, we'll go check around at the patio door. So they went to look there, and there was nobody there at all. But when the policemen saw my friend, they remembered that they had been there once before, but they had never been able to find anybody at the house. So my friend said, okay, you can leave. It'll be okay now. We never hear this more than once a night. So what do you mean? You never hear this more than once a night? Well, it seems that the original owner that had the house had hung herself in the kitchen.
This is like the third or the fourth suicide. It seems like suicides, for some reason, are more likely to remain than others. That should be telling. That's a strong message, I think. So she had hung herself.
She hung herself in the kitchen, and her husband he traveled a lot, or he went hunting like our husbands did. He was not home an awful lot.
Yes.
But when he got home that night, he tried to get into the house, and it was all bolted on the inside, and he went around to the patio doors and looked into the kitchen, and he could see that she was hung, that she was dead, hanging. So he shot himself in the backyard that night.
Oh, my God.
And that's what we think the pounding on the door was his ghost trying to get in to help her.
All right. I really appreciate your story. Thank you. And there's so many aspects of that I think are right on the money. The fact that there already tonight, how many have we heard that were suicides? So that must mean there's a greater chance. It must mean there's a greater chance for suicides to remain or be forced to remain. We don't know the nature of the other side, or even that represents the other side. It may be a kind of a hellish place where people who do that kind of thing, commit suicide, remain. I don't know. And the other, of course, is that things continue to repeat. It may well be that the hell you enter when you do something like that is that you are then forced to repeat for eternity. I'll put a question mark there. That act that got you there. Night after night after night. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. What is your...
Tom.
Tom, okay. Where are you, Tom?
I'm from Chicago.
Okay.
This happened approximately about 11 years ago.
Yes, Tom.
It's around 3 in the morning. I was coming home from a party with a friend. We're driving down Roberts Road, and I know you're thinking Resurrection Mary, but this has nothing to do with Resurrection Mary.
Okay.
There's somebody standing by the curb with a lantern, and he got in front of the car, and we slowed down. He walked towards the car. We looked. He had one. It was February. He had like one of his arms was out, like a bandage was hanging, and it was like stained. It looked like maybe blood, whatever. It was like really gruesome looking. His mouth was agape. His eyes were like rolled in back of his head. His leg was missing, and you could see like a translucency through him. We just looked at each other and just like, whoa. We drove on. He walked in back of the car, and the other car, we looked in back, and the other car just went right through him.
Went right through him?
Went right through him.
And you and, I'm sorry, who was with you? Who saw it?
A friend. We were in a car.
And you both saw it?
We both saw it, and he was right by the side of us. We drove, and then he continued to walk across the street, and there was another cemetery. It was Bethany. He was walking to the other cemetery, and there was another car in back that drove right through this apparition. I mean, that blew me away. I was like, for like a year, I'm telling you.
So there's no doubt in your mind then about about ghosts, right?
Oh no, I have so many paranormal experiences. But that was probably the most spooked out one I've ever had.
Of course. I mean, when you see that with your own eyes, and
I had a witness too.
And then another set of eyes sees it.
And then we called Justice Police, and they didn't want to, get into it. And then I called Richard Crow.
Well, can you blame them?
Of course.
Wanna take a ride? Well, call Art Bell from west of the Rockies at 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies at 1-800-825-5033. First-time callers may reach Art at 1-775-727-1222. The wildcard line is open at 1-775-727-1295. And to reach Art on the toll-free international line, call your AT&T operator and have them dial 800-893-0903. This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell on the Premier Radio Network.
Coast to Coast AM, actually. I am Art Bell, and we may expand this program to 5 hours tonight. I'm beginning to like your stories a lot. You're doing very well. So that's all we're doing tonight, by the way. We're telling ghost stories. They're your stories. No official guest, just all of you. And in just a very short moment, we'll get back to it. Mike in San Diego, Fast Blast Art. Time supposedly does not exist in the spirit world. So what the heck does the word eternity mean to a ghost? So if a person goes to hell for eternity, then what would that mean to a spirit that has gone to hell for committing suicide? I don't know, Mike. I just know what I'm hearing, and as you listen to these stories, an awful lot of them involve suicides. And time, well, it may mean nothing, but how could you have a punishment for eternity without realization and understanding that you're in this for eternity? West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hi.
Hi, Art.
Hello. What is your first name?
I'm Elizabeth, and I'm calling from Phoenix, Arizona.
All right, Elizabeth.
And, before I forget to tell you, if you're ever in Phoenix, there's a haunted restaurant you may be interested in. They have good food and about 20 ghosts.
Good food and 20 ghosts?
At least.
All right.
But anyway, I've also had numerous ghost encounters ever since I was about 6 years old. I go on record now, I don't like them. But the one I'm going to tell you about involves my late brother.
All right.
And before he died, he lived in northern Arizona, and I'm down here in Phoenix, of course, and he had been going through some marital problems. And my mama lived with me at the time, too, me and my baby, and he had asked, could he move back in with us while he got a divorce? And, of course, I said, yes, of course, you can.
Mm-hmm.
But I told him, I want to be with you when you pack your things. Something just told me I needed to be there.
Yes.
And he had promised, at the time he was driving for a trucking firm, and he had promised he would come get me, and, I just wanted to be there. I wanted to watch his back, basically.
Okay. All right.
Well, on August 5, 1995, I had worked night shift, and, so I didn't get to bed till like about 5 o'clock that morning. And at about 11:20,
You've got your radio on, don't you?
It's in the other room.
Yes, you shouldn't have a radio on. It's very confusing. But go ahead. You woke up.
Yeah, well, I just woke up. I had a most god-awful, horrible, sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I had such a blinding pain. I mean, a very hot, burning pain in the back of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had migraines before, and this was not like any migraine, and it lasted for several minutes. And I just knew that something was wrong, that something awful was happening, but I didn't know what. And then about 3 hours later, I got the news that my brother had been shot.
So that was it. You knew, in other words, you knew?
I just knew something
had to happen.
I knew something awful was happening. Well, I went up to the hospital where he was at. And like I said, it was a 4-hour drive, and that'll make sense to you in a minute. And he had left a living will, and I was with him when they disconnected the life support. They couldn't get me out of the room.
He was brain dead.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But I couldn't be there, to watch his body die. I just couldn't face that.
I understand.
And then finally on August 8th, I got the news that he had died, and it was like I got the news at 7:15. They said he had died at 7:05.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my mom and I were just totally devastated. And I managed to get her to bed in her room, and then I went to bed in my room, and I was just in my room, and I was just, crying my heart out.
Yes.
And I thought my mom had gone to sleep also, so I wasn't even thinking anything. But then at 11:05, exactly 4 hours after he was pronounced dead, I heard the kitchen door open, and I heard it slam shut. And I heard my brother call out, "Mom, Beth, I'm home." And I remember looking up because, my clock was right there by my bed, and I'm like, that's wishful thinking. It's just wishful thinking. And I literally cried until I cried myself to sleep. And the next morning, I went in to check on my mom, and she had been awake all night just crying and crying. And I was just trying to comfort her, and then she said, "Beth, last night, I heard the kitchen door open, and I heard it slam, and I heard Lonnie call out, 'Mom, Beth, I'm home.'" And I said, "What time was that?" And she said, "I looked at my clock. It was 11:05.
Well, gee, what can I say? I guess he did come home one more time, huh?
Yeah, he did.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Maybe until you realize you are dead, you do something regular. I don't know. I mean, if you're able to in the next life, maybe you do that. Maybe you go home. Maybe you go to work. Maybe you keep headed toward, if you were on the way to somewhere and had a car accident, maybe your body just keeps going toward its goal. You shake it off, and even though you're dead, you just keep going to do the next thing you were going to do until, of course, you realize. You're on the air, Ghost to Ghost AM. Hi.
Hello, Art.
Hello there.
How are you?
I'm fine. What is your first name?
It's Steve.
Okay.
I'm calling from Vista, California.
All right, Steve.
And this is a pretty scary one.
Good. That's what I'm looking for. Go right ahead.
I have a friend. She's from Tijuana, Mexico. It happened, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago. This happened in her neighborhood, and, I don't like telling this, but I almost have an obligation. There was a neighborhood party, kids about 20 years old and up.
Sure.
And, they do what typical Mexicans do there, listen to music, eat, drink beer. And one of the people at the party brought out a Ouija board, and I'll refer to it as a Ouija. That's what they call it. And they started playing. There was probably, I think she said 15 people there.
Yes.
And they're all from the same neighborhood. So they were playing it, and people were asking questions, pretty neutral questions. And there was one guy who was pretty machismo. Maybe he had too many drinks. I don't know. He started calling this Ouija out. He was, I won't use the word, but he was saying, "F you, Ouija."
Mm-hmm.
Ouija is a mentiroso, which is a liar.
Mm-hmm. And this is not wise.
No, it's not.
I'm not even Mexican, and I don't, but I know that. That's not smart.
Yes, it's not smart. And so this went on, and he kept doing this, and he wanted to be confrontational with this thing.
Yeah.
And he's, they said, "Okay, that's enough. Let's put this away." And he goes, "No, I insist. I want to play. Yo quiero jugar. I want to play."
Yes.
So he started playing, and he asked the neutral questions at first. And he would respond by saying, "You're a liar," or, cuss it out again.
Yes.
And he asked a question I don't think he should have asked. He asked the Ouija, "Do you know when I'm going to die?"
Uh-huh.
And it was matter of fact. It spelled out Claro que sí, which is of course. And he called it a liar again.
Yeah?
And he said, "Okay, if you know, you liar," he called it.
Uh-huh.
When? And the Ouija spelled out in esta noche, which is this night.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Good answer.
Yeah. So,
you just don't do that. And so now what happened to our friend?
Well, his girlfriend was crying hysterically, like, "Stop this, I'm getting scared." And He's like, I'm not scared. This is nothing.
Uh-huh.
And so I think my friend told me, like, they all started going home maybe like at 1 in the morning.
Yeah.
And Tijuana is a kind of a hilly area, and
I know it well. I work there.
yeah,
Yes.
and I saw where this happened too, and I saw the house where this party occurred.
And so what happened to him?
He was walking across the street, and it was like it's hard to describe, but there's like a curve, and then it goes downhill.
You don't have to describe it. What happened to him?
He got hit by a truck and killed.
Yeah, it figures. Well, you don't do that. You really don't do that. Thank you very much. A Ouija board, whatever else, I won't say a lot about it because I, years ago, had an experience with a Ouija board that I really will not discuss. But I will tell you this much. It's absolutely a conduit to somewhere else. And I'm not so sure that it's the Ouija board itself, but it's you. I suppose it could be a slab of anything, but if you're inviting contact, if you're asking for contact, then you're very likely going to get it. At the very least, you're going to open a corridor to somebody or something somewhere and, cussing it out and calling it out, in essence, wouldn't be such a good idea. And asking it when you're going to die, even less of a good idea. And well, there you go. So I wonder if what you might call out on the other end has the power to, let's say, change what would have been your date otherwise. Because that was just too good an answer this night. So do we conclude from that whatever was on the other side had the power to arrange the date and had about enough? You're on the air, Coast to Coast AM with Ghost to Ghost AM, with Art Bell. Hi. Hello?
Hello, Art.
Yes.
Hey.
Your name is?
Brad.
Hey, Brad.
And listening to you here in Phoenix on Mighty Streamlink.
Oh, yes.
And the story I have is it's not so much a terrifying one, but a spooky one, nonetheless. My grandfather passed away when I was about 15, and he was an unusual guy. The best way to describe him would probably be as a little bit ornery. He was 77 when he died, and he was still.
You're in the right to be ornery.
Exactly.
By 77.
Yeah, and he was still, telling funny jokes and pulling pranks and grabbing the dog's tail when it walked by, and he was an interesting guy. And he had a heart attack, and he was in a coma. And of course, the whole family gathered, went to upstate New York and gathered around him. And my sister was there, and she had recently gotten married, and she was the apple of his eye. They were just so very close.
Oh, yes.
And she had planned a trip to go overseas with her new husband, and they planned a trip to go to Israel. And, things were up in the air. Obviously, they don't know exactly what's going to happen. And in that situation, the prognosis wasn't good. And my mom told my sister, it would be best if you went. He would want you to, keep your plans and go ahead and go.
Yes.
And reluctantly, she, got on the plane with her husband, and they took the trip. And I believe the day that they arrived, they were sleeping off, the jet lag and everything. So I think it's like a 15-hour flight.
Sure.
And my brother-in-law he'd worked on Wall Street for a while, so needless to say, he was a commodities trader. He had a lot of money. And he bought a Concorde watch before he left. And it was a brand new watch, and they're quite expensive. Mm-hmm. And he noticed that the watch had stopped. And, shortly thereafter, they're getting gathered or whatever, and my mom called and, let them know that my grandfather had indeed passed away, and that, they were starting to get the details and everything, and found out that he passed away at exactly the same time as my brother-in-law's watch had stopped.
Huh.
And the spookiest part of all is my grandfather was a watchmaker. For 40 years he spent, fixing watches.
His way of sending a message, huh?
Yeah, and it's not scary, but it's spooky, and it's a trick that he would pull.
Yeah. All right, son. I know about watches. Watch this.
Exactly. It was great, though.
I got you. All right, thank you. Yes, in the category of how to get a message across, a watchmaker, you got yourself a new watch, and you didn't stick around for me, huh? Watch this. First time caller line, you're on the air. Hello. Hi. What is your first name, please?
Randy.
Maybe?
Randy.
Randy. Okay, Randy.
Yeah, Randy from Seattle. Hey, and in 1995, I was a Marine Lance Corporal stationed in Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station in Hawaii.
Yes.
The island of Oahu.
Yes, tough duty.
Yeah, I was,
I was being
do a lot of
facetious.
duty.
Hawaii is a pretty good place to get stationed.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. But I do a lot of duty on the back gate.
Uh-huh.
We called it Bravo Gate. And that was from about 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And it get spooky a lot. You know, you'd sit out there by yourself.
Yeah.
And,
well, the islands are spooky anyway. You know, they're naturally that way.
yeah, and the island that base was built on was supposedly a meeting place in the old days for Hawaiian chiefs, and there's a lot of burial mounds and that sort of thing out there. But
I know.
You'd sit out there late at night, and you'd kind of hear things, you know, and I'd hear what I thought were voices and things like that. And one night, I thought I was really spooked, and I heard maybe a voice or something say, "Hey," 2 or 3 times, you know, kind of a few minutes apart. Just, you know, maybe it was my imagination or something, but so I called another MP friend of mine to come out, and, you know, they come out and bring you dinner.
Yes.
Sort of thing, and got to talking to him about it, and he didn't seem very surprised at all, and he said a couple years prior, he'd been part of he said he used to hear the same sort of thing himself. He'd actually heard his name called. His name was Jason, and he heard his name called a few times, and he'd been part of a work. Actually, an MP had killed himself on that back gate a couple years prior, and he'd been part of the working party that had been assigned to clean up the mess out of the restroom that was right across the street.
Oh.
And
so the death had been right there.
yeah, and it was a really interesting story. He said that that since the base was on a peninsula, there was 2 approaches from the front and back gate. He said at the time there was an MP on the front gate and the back gate, and their plan had been to kill their watch commander and then kill themselves. And the whole plan had kind of gone wrong, and the MP on the back gate ended up killing himself anyway.
Yeah, here we are again. These suicides, a really disproportionate number of the calls this morning have really involved suicides, and then appearances or continuing appearances. And so there's another one, folks. There obviously is something very, very much wrong with committing suicide, with choosing to end your own life. That would seem to earn you a period of time, if not eternity, doing something. You're beginning to see a pattern here. Not an absolute pattern, but nevertheless a pattern. The relatives, they either make an appearance, or dead bodies washing up on the shore make an appearance, or we get an appearance for one of many reasons. But one thread that seems obvious tonight, I mean absolutely obvious, is those who take their own lives appear to stay exactly where they are, probably doing exactly what they were doing at the time. And I don't know about you, but the prospect of doing that bad, evil thing for eternity, and you know, that eternity is a very, very long time indeed, right? It's forever. So if you're listening tonight, then you're hearing that same pattern, and if anything would ever discourage anybody from taking their own life, that certainly would be it. And if you throw in a murder and something really evil in the process, then I think it's more likely than ever to happen. All right, well, you're listening to Ghost AM 2003 from the high desert in the middle of the night with the wind howling out there. I'm Art Bell.
long black road to the darkened sky in its rage. But the white bird just sits in her cage, unknown.
Call Art Bell in the Kingdom of Nye from west of the Rockies at 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies, 1-800-825-5033. First-time callers may reach Art at 1-775-727-1222. And the wildcard line is open at 1-775-727-1295. To reach Art on the toll-free international line, call your AT&T operator and have them dial 800-893-0903. This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell from the Kingdom of Nye.
So in other words, people on the other side send messages. Some of them serve time on the other side. And I'm sure many, many other things. Ghost to Ghost continues in a moment. I guess maybe this is worth a thought. For those of you who have faith, then there is certainly no need to hear any stories of this sort. Not really. Because you know that when you die, you're with your God, and you have your religion. But then there are some of us, though we believe in God, and I do believe in God. I'll speak for myself. I believe in God. But I'm also really a pragmatist. I'm really a pragmatist, and I'm not positive. I'm not positive about the afterlife. I'm not positive about anything. So short of faith that would bridge that for me, I'm inquiring. I'm going to keep inquiring about what the others, whether there really is something on the other side past our physical lives. It's a really important question. And as you listen to these stories, maybe, just maybe, you'll begin to get the idea that there is, and you're hearing some proof of it. On our first-time caller line, you're on the air. Hello.
Art?
Hi.
Hi, this is Bill from Pennsylvania.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well. I agree with your comment. I believe in God, too, but there are just too many things that are left unquestioned. Michio Kaku, with his extrapolation of superstring theory, shows we're still learning about dimensions with more to go, so everything is still up in the air as far as I'm concerned.
You better believe it. Yeah. Okay.
You know, I've been a nurse for 23 years, and I've done a lot of things in my life and traveled all over the United States.
Yeah, you're on duty as a nurse right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm on duty.
Yeah. Okay.
In prison.
That's right. It's a prison. Yeah, I had to call an extension to get through to you.
That's right.
Okay.
We've had a busy night, too. Interesting thing happened to me about 20 years ago at a nursing home when I was a night supervisor, like you, I'm a night hawk. And nursing homes, for some reason, seem to attract this kind of activity. Maybe it's because there's internment places for folks who don't want to be there, and there's a lot of sad experiences.
That's right.
Well, I was cutting my teeth on the night shift there one night on the second floor in the elevator. Mysteriously, around 1 o'clock, began to open and close and go up and down the floor. And I asked one of the aides, I says, "Hey, something wrong with this elevator?" He says, "No, that's George."
George?
I says, "George?" I said, "Yeah, George. He used to be a resident here. He was wheelchair bound, and he whiled away his hours going up and down the elevator all day until his bedtime, and when he died, that elevator just started doing that. Usually he does it in the wee hours of the morning." Oh, yeah, right. Okay, I've heard this before. Well, day after day, I've been just kept the mental tally. Around 1 a.m. in the morning, that elevator started kicking in, and I would go in there and I'd check the switches, because I'm a geek like you, being a ham.
Yep.
I want to see what's going on here.
Sure.
Well, there's nothing wrong with it, and it kept doing it till about 4:30 in the morning. One time we had an aide, brand new aide, come in, and the elevator at 1 o'clock, by the stroke of the hour, started moving up and down. She says, "What's going on?" She says, "Someone coming up to the floor." She says, "No, that's George."
By now, you're the one saying,
"Oh yeah,
no,
absolutely.
that's George."
I've been there about 6 months." I said, "Okay, George is cool. We learn to cohabitate with him.
Yes.
You can sense a spirit too."
But maybe in a way though, maybe it's not so cool for George. I mean, my God, here's a man who's in a wheelchair in life, right? Mm-hmm. And you would hope somehow that in death he would be released from that.
You would think so, but almost like there's unfinished business there.
Oh, I hear you, but see, listen. Thank you very much. Go ahead, back to duty. There's two theories regarding the end of life. One is that as a ghost, you continue to do whatever you did at the moment of death. You know, if that's a suicide, then you keep doing that. If you were an invalid in a wheelchair, then you keep going up and down that elevator. And so is it a tape loop? Is it just sort of a lingering memory? Or, in fact, is George the person in that wheelchair in some other dimension, affecting this dimension, doing what he did during the latter years of his life, just going up and down in that elevator? It suggests some rather disturbing things about death, doesn't it? Wildcard line, you're on the air. Ghost to Ghost AM. Hi. Hello. Going once. Going twice. Gone. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Ghost to Ghost AM. Hello.
Hello, is it me?
Yes, it is.
This is Daryl from Missouri.
Hello, Daryl.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty well, thank you.
Good. Okay. See if I can tell this story short and not ramble as I tend to do.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks for the warning.
All right. So, my dad, he was kind of obsessed with death, and he passed away January 31st of 1981. And about 2 months after that, I had a dream about him, and in the dream, you know, it was very vivid. I told him that he had died, and he didn't know, and all this and whatever, and he told me that he could come back anytime I really needed him. So that was the dream and whatever, and so then, like, 10 years later, some things were going on, and I was feeling very depressed about silly stuff and whatever, and I just had this feeling like somebody was tapping me on the shoulder. I just had this constant feeling like somebody was trying to tell me something, tapping me on the shoulder, whatever.
Right.
And so I'm headed home one night. I work second shift, and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I lived way out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm going down the road, and I'm just feeling very frustrated, and I'm doing about 100 miles an hour going down this road, this back road in the middle of nowhere, and I just let go of the steering wheel, and I just threw my hands up in the air, and I go, what? Because I just had this feeling like somebody was trying to tell me something, and I just wasn't getting it or whatever.
At 100 miles an hour, you
Yes.
throw your hands off the wheel and say what?
Yes. And coincidentally, I just happened to be passing a real old cemetery right at that point in time.
Yeah?
So anyway, all I can say is that all of a sudden I just got this intense feeling like, the only way I can describe it is like if you were a little pocket transistor radio and you had the antenna up and you touched your antenna to the transmitter. Just like the ultimate hum, overload, squeal, feedback, whatever, and the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I guess I'd let off the gas and grabbed the steering wheel. I'm not really conscious of that at that point. And I'm only like 5 miles from home. I should have been home in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I just got this, and I just heard him, and he started talking to me, and he's telling me, you know, I just wanted to let you know, I wanted to prepare you that all this stuff is going to happen to you, all this bad stuff, and I just wanted to prepare you for, you know, whatever. And he said, you know, your mom's going to get sick, and she's going to die, and you're going to get laid off from your job, and you're going to get divorced, and
wow,
blah, 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 blah. And he just starts telling me all this stuff. And
you knew this was your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like I was hearing it in my head or whatever. So
Gee, you hear from the grave with just nothing but bad news.
Yeah. So I turned down the gravel road, and the gravel road is like a mile completely straight right to my house. And so I turned down the gravel road, and I'm just like coasting down the gravel road, and he's just telling me all this stuff. And I'm afraid to look, but I look to my right, and I can see him sitting in the seat beside me. And he's like, it looks just like him, but he's like translucent and kind of bluish gray color or whatever, you know. And
yes.
but it's like when I look straight ahead, I can see him like clearly out of the corner of my eye, but when I look straight at him, he's like not quite as clear.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm just coasting down the gravel road, and he's telling me, you know, well, this, that, and the other, and it's like as soon as I can think of a question, the answer's already there. And it's like I'm a computer downloading information or whatever, and so I'm coasting down this gravel road, And, like, one of the things I was stressing out about was the brakes were bad on my truck, and I was like, oh, there's snow on the ground, it's January, I'm going to have to get out there, you know. And he goes, well, why don't you go up there to the house, to our old house in the garage and build a wood fire and do it up there in the garage? And I'm like, I didn't even think of that. What's wrong with me? And so I get right down there, and as soon as I get to the pond right in front of our house, there's this little pond, he's telling me all this stuff, and then he's gone, instantly gone. And so I pull up to the back of the house, and my wife, ex-wife now, comes running out the door, and she goes, are you all right? Are you all right? Are you all right? And I go, yeah, why? And I'm just crying, you know. And she goes, because I was sitting in the kitchen watching out the window, and the whole time you're coming down the gravel road, there was this bright white light above the top of your truck, and I thought it was a UFO, and I thought it was going to beam you up or something.
Oh, really?
And then right when you got to the pond, it disappeared.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, no. I said, no, it wasn't a UFO. That was Dad.
And you did just say former wife, so
Yeah.
I assume the rest of what he said, including the divorce, all came true.
Yeah, my mom died 3 years later. I was laid off 3 years later.
And your divorce.
I was divorced 9 years later.
Well, maybe Dad will be back with some good news. You could certainly use some. All
Well,
right.
hey, but the warning is at least worth it, you know.
Well, I guess so. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. So there's one of just plain outright contact, just straight on contact in a conversation. And here's another thing I wonder about. Assuming that we make it to the other side in the manner suggested by all of these stories, how hard is it to manifest ourselves in the way, for example, that man did to his son? How hard is that? What energy does that take? In what manner is that done? But there's so many of them. There's got to be some truth to all of this. At the bottom of all of these stories, there's a lesson, and that lesson is that life doesn't end with the physical. Not if you're listening. It just doesn't. There's something else. The consciousness and who we are continue in some way or another. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. What is your name, please?
My name's Peter.
Okay, Peter. Where are you?
I'm in San Diego.
Okay, fire away.
Well, I almost didn't tell this story because, but then when your bumper music came on, when White Bird came on, I figured that was a sign, so I had to keep going with the story.
That piece of music is a sign, my friend. That's why I play
Well,
it.
You'll understand why.
All right.
About 20 years ago, I was very, very deeply in love with somebody, but it couldn't happen, and
She belonged to another?
He belonged to another.
He belonged to another. Okay.
But I tried to stay in touch every couple of months and give a call. And then one time when I called, I was told that he had died. And they'd had the funeral and everything, and I hadn't known anything about it. But I found out where he was buried, and I went up there. It was a small town. It was a large cemetery, but in a small town.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on late on a Saturday afternoon in the fall, and there was nobody there, and I had no idea where to find his grave, so I just started looking. And
Sure.
it was a very large cemetery, maybe 100 yards wide, maybe 300 yards long, ringed by forest. And there was an old section where there was stand-up headstones, and then there was a new section that had brass plaques flat on the ground.
Well, they pack them in, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
not a lot of the residents complain, so they
Yeah.
pack them in.
So I started just kind of wandering aimlessly around, hoping that maybe maybe he was in a family plot in the old section where there'd be a stand-up headstone where I could see the family name, but then I couldn't find him, and it started to get late in the afternoon, and the sun started to go down, and I started to think I wasn't going to be able to find him, and I was on the far side near the woods, and all of a sudden this bird flies out of the trees, chirping really, really loud.
Yes.
And flies down about 20 or 30 yards and back into the trees. And I do not know why, but I followed that bird and walked down in the direction where that bird had flown. And when I got down to about where the bird had flown back into the trees, it came out again and flew another 20, 30 yards around. And so I just kept following. And I followed it pretty much all the way around to the opposite side from where I was.
Yes.
And then it came out of the trees and flew straight across the cemetery. And I just started walking, and that was in the new section with the brass plaques flat on the ground.
Yes.
And I just started walking across the cemetery in the direction that bird had flown. And about 5 or 6 markers in, there he was.
There he was. That bird took you to the grave.
That bird led me to his grave.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I see why you winced a little bit at White Bird.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and good night. So there you have it. Yes, there may be something about birds. On the day my father died, you may remember I was on the air full time at that point. On the day that my dad died, a bat flew on our porch. I mean, bats just don't do that. We've never, in all the days we've been here, it has never happened before. A bat just flew on our porch and wouldn't move. There was nothing apparently wrong with the bat at all. Nothing. He was fine. He just wouldn't move. And so we scooped him up, and, it's warm here in the summer, so we put him in a shady spot, and when night came, the bat just left. But never, ever, ever has a bat just come to spend the day. That day, the day my father died, he did. That's a true story. You're on the air on Ghost to Ghost AM. Good morning.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you, Art?
Just fine. What is your name?
My name is Rob, and I live in the greater Detroit, Michigan area.
Okay, Rob, welcome.
And I listen to you on CKLW out of Windsor, Canada.
Absolute monster out of Windsor, yes.
It's good hearing your voice again.
And yours. At least for the first time. Yeah.
My particular incident happened nearly, 50 years ago. I was a small child in 1953. And I lived in the northern suburbs of Detroit at that point. But in any event, I was in my bedroom at the age of 3, and I suddenly popped out of my bed, and I was rather agitated and excited. And I noticed in the corner of the room where the wall and the ceiling intersect, there was an apparition of a very seductive-looking woman.
Ah.
She didn't appear in full body, but it was more like from the waist up. She had extremely pale skin, long black hair. She had a tight-fitting bustier on her. She was rather buxom. I was just simply mesmerized by looking at her and in awe, and I stood there for a minute. And
you were in immediate lust.
Something of that nature. In any event, I was just staring at her, and I don't remember her lips moving, but somehow she was communicating to me, and she was summoning me, and she said, "Come here, Blue Eyes, come here, Blue Eyes, come here."
Oh.
And I do have blue eyes. So I started to approach her. I took a step or two forward, and I got towards the apparition as I saw it in the corner of the ceiling, and she said, "Stop," to me.
Uh-huh.
And at that point, she went poof, and she disappeared, and simultaneously when that happened, I had a sharp pain in my left eye. And I thought that was very strange that, that had happened simultaneously with the poof.
Yeah.
So I went back to sleep and tried to, retain whatever I could of my composure at the age of 3.
Indeed. Listen, can you hold? We've got to do a quick
I will
break.
hold.
All right, good. Stay right where you are. A seductive ghost, huh? Well, as they go, that might be all right. From the high desert, this is Ghost to Ghost AM. And, of course, I'm Art Bell. Stay right there.
Want to take a ride? Call Art Bell from west of the Rockies at 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies, 1-800-825-5033. First-time callers may reach Art at 1-775-727-1222. The wildcard line is open at 1-775-727-1295. And to call Art on the toll-free international line, call your AT&T operator and have them dial 800-893-0903. This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell from the Kingdom of Nye.
A little thing called Ghost to Ghost AM, which will continue in just a moment. Obviously, not everybody has had an experience with an entity, but as you can clearly see as you listen this morning, enough people have in enough ways that it merits your attention, if purely from nothing more than an investigative point of view. It merits your listening because so many people have, and what it means. Good morning. On the first-time caller line, you're on the air.
Hi, am I on the air?
You are indeed.
Hi, my name's Brian. I'm calling from Davenport, Iowa. Originally I'm from New York. I still live out there, actually. I came out here visiting a friend, and the place where they live in is haunted. I just started listening to the show, actually, earlier this week. It's a great show. I like it. Very interesting. A lot of interesting stuff. And a very weird thing happened the other night. First of all, can ghosts sense fear?
Can ghosts sense fear? I've got to give you an honest answer, sir. Of course, I don't know. I would guess yes. It's just a guess.
Because, I don't know, I listened to the show and kind of like all the ghost talk, especially since they told me this place is haunted, and I mean...
So, tell me what happened to you.
All right, the other night, right, I was listening to the show, it was like 4 in the morning, phone rang. One ring, then I hear a voice out of the...
First-time callers, area code 775-727-1222.
All right, well, he used some language that we cannot use on the air, so that's it for him. I understand that you're involved in the stories that you're telling, but if you use language that's not airable, well, then you won't be on the air. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art.
Yes, sir. Hi. What is your first name, please?
My name is Bob. I'm calling from West Dundee, Illinois.
All right, Bob.
Listening to you from WLS out of Chicago.
Of course.
And I seen my father's soul leave his body.
You saw his soul leave his body?
Yes, sir, I did.
How did this happen?
Well, in 1997, he was diagnosed with cancer, and I took 2 months off of work to go down and spend some time with him. And did not expect to bury him.
Yeah.
But the cancer progressed very, very quickly. And my parents were married for 47 years, and my mother was obviously a basket case, so I took over as primary caregiver. Our whole family was down there.
That's a tough job.
It really is. It takes a lot out of you.
You bet.
I have a niece. At the time, she was 5. An older niece. At the time, she was 13. And my sister that lives down there. We were all at his bedside. I was holding his left hand. My mother was holding his right hand.
Mm-hmm.
And the others were gathered around. And when he took his last breath, I said, "He's gone." And the youngest one, the 5-year-old, ran out of the room hysterical. "He's dead. He's dead." Mm-hmm. I sent the older child out to calm her down, and my mother left the room trying to calm down the young child. And my sister and I were just in the room alone, and she was just crying hysterically. And just then, not even maybe 30 seconds after he had passed, I noticed what looked like smoke coming from his chest, but it was more formed. It was probably, I would say, about 3 inches long and about 1 inch wide. And it floated, not dissipating at all, until it hit the door of the bedroom, which was probably about 8 foot away from the bed. And once it hit the door, it just dissipated.
What was it like seeing something like that? I mean, that would freeze me. I think it would freeze me in fear.
Well, the most surprising thing, I wasn't afraid. I think the most thing that shocked me, not seeing it, didn't really shock me. What really surprised me is the size of it, of how small it was. It was just very small.
This may surprise you, or maybe it won't surprise you, but I've talked to people who have actually felt a soul move through them. A lot of, as you were, a lot of people are close to dying people. Many times they're even over them, hugging them. And I've talked to people who have actually felt a soul move through them as that other person died. In your case, you saw that soul.
Yes, I did. What's
that done to your belief system? I mean...
Well, I've always believed in God. I was engaged at the time, and I wasn't really, I believe in God, but I wasn't going to church. My wife is a very religious woman, and after that, I made it a point to get back to church every Sunday and finish my sacraments.
I guess that would make sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Rand, have a good night. Yeah, that would make sense, wouldn't it? Once you have an absolute belief, of course, religions depend on this. I mean, I'm told that we are controlled by religion, that we're kept in check by religion, that we don't misbehave because of faith and religion, and we don't go out and do dirty deeds and that sort of thing, right? Because of religion. It keeps us in check. But you can see how it would. And if you absolutely believed, you more or less would behave yourself. If you didn't believe in a hereafter, well, then what difference, I suppose, some would say, does it make what you do when you're here? Because there's really no ultimate reward or punishment when you're gone. So that serves the religions, to be sure. And maybe it serves us. And maybe, of course, it's true. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art. This is Sarah in Omaha.
Hi, Sarah.
How are you?
I'm very well indeed, thank you.
Good. I'm listening to you on KFAB 1110.
Oh, the big monster there in the west.
Yeah. I have a ghost story for you.
All right, that's what we're here for.
Okay. When my daughter was a little girl, we lived in a big house in, it was a big brick house in Cleveland, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was that she kept getting out of her crib all the time, and she was about 18 months old, and she would get out in the middle of the night and go and play on the staircase. And I'd hear her laughing in the night, and I'd get up and go back down and get her and put her to bed. And she'd always have some toys around her. So anyway, on this particular night, we had some people over from out of town, some friends of ours, and we didn't have a guest room for them to sleep in. So we used to have people just sleep downstairs in the living room, would make arrangements for them to sleep down there. And this staircase opened up on the living room. It was a big house, and the staircase was an open staircase, and you could see through the staircase from the living room.
Right.
Anyway, so everybody went to sleep, and everything was fine, and we woke up the next morning, and we were kind of in the kitchen eating breakfast and everything, and they were talking about how cute our kids were. And I said, when did you meet, my daughter? And they said, oh, well, last night they were playing on the stairs. And I said, well, was it, early in the morning? Because sometimes she gets up and crawls out of her crib and everything.
Yes.
And they said, well, it was really cute how your son let her back upstairs and, looked like he was going to put her back to bed. And I said, well, I don't have a son. I just have the one daughter. And they looked at each other, and I looked at my husband, and we go, it's kind of strange that you saw two children.
Yes.
And they go, yeah, we saw two children playing on the stairs. And I said, well, that's impossible, because we just have the one child.
Right.
And so we kind of, at that point, realized that they'd seen two children. And after that, I was always, thinking that maybe she had a little playmate in the middle of the night that she got up to go play with. And so...
and the playmate took her back to safety.
Yeah.
Yeah, all
Let
right.
her back upstairs.
Got you. Thank you very much. Well, there you are. What do you make of that? The prospect of children as ghosts is very disturbing, and so when we have the EVP people here, we're constantly getting the voice. Too many times we're getting the voice of children that appear to be on the other side, commenting on various things, but their little voices are unmistakable. These are children. That would mean that... What do we have here? Do we have two parallel worlds that intersect at time to time, from time to time? Is that what we have? Do we have a world where one little child might save the life of another child by leading her to safety, or that the invisible playmates maybe are visible to those who are claiming to see them? West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello. Hello. Going once. Going twice. Gone